The notification lit up my phone at 2:47 a.m., shattering the quiet of my Seattle apartment like a thunderclap. Destiny System Assignment Complete. Target: Leonardo Voss. Objective: establish an unbreakable personal bond and guide mutual growth. Completion required for program success and equity retention. My stomach dropped as I read the name again. Leonardo Voss, the straight, no-nonsense CEO who had just acquired my tech startup 6 months ago and made it crystal clear during the takeover meeting that he valued traditional team dynamics above all else. I threw the phone across the bed, heart racing. This had to be a glitch. The Destiny system was supposed to pair employees with compatible growth partners to boost company performance. A fancy AI experiment pushed by HR after the merger. But Leonardo, the man whose sharp blue eyes had sized me up like I was an anomaly in his perfect corporate world? As a gay man who had fought hard to build my career while keeping my personal life locked away from family expectations, this assignment felt like a cruel joke. I sat there in the dark, the city lights of Seattle flickering through the rain-streaked window, and replayed every interaction we'd had. The day Vostek swallowed my little app company, I'd stood in the boardroom trying not to stare at the way his tailored suit hugged his broad shoulders. He'd shaken my hand with a firm grip and said, "Impressive work, Thompson. Let's see if you fit the Voss culture." Fit. That word had haunted me. My parents back in Spokane still sent me church pamphlets every month, hoping I'd find the right path. My older sister Jenna was the only one who knew the truth and kept telling me to stop hiding. And now this system, this stupid, expensive piece of code, had decided Leonardo Voss was my key to growth. By morning, I was exhausted but determined. I couldn't ignore the assignment. My remaining equity was tied to it. One missed milestone and I'd lose the payout that would finally let me buy my own place instead of renting this shoebox. I dressed in my sharpest button-down, practiced a neutral smile in the mirror, and drove to the Vostek Tower downtown. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt endless. When the doors opened, there he was, Leonardo, standing at the coffee station in a charcoal suit, dark hair perfectly styled, talking quietly to his assistant. He glanced up and our eyes met. For a split second something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe surprise, before his expression smoothed into that professional mask. "Kai Thompson," he said, voice low and steady. "Didn't expect to see you up here so early." I forced a laugh that sounded fake even to me. "The system sent me an assignment. Looks like you're my growth partner." I held up my phone, screen showing the notification. Leonardo's brow furrowed. He took the phone, scanned the text, and handed it back without a word. Then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed short and sharp. "Must be a bug. I don't do personal growth sessions." But the system didn't care. By noon, HR confirmed it was locked in. Leonardo Voss was my target, and I had 30 days to forge the bond. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to work while my mind spun. What did unbreakable personal bond even mean? Coffee chats? Team-building exercises? Or something deeper that would force me to crack open the parts of myself I'd spent years sealing shut? That evening I met my best friend Marcus at our usual bar in Capitol Hill. He was straight but the most supportive guy I knew, always the first to defend me when my parents visited and made passive comments. I slid onto the stool and told him everything. Marcus whistled low. "Leonardo Voss? The guy who looks like he stepped out of a GQ ad and talks like he owns the world? Dude, that's either the best glitch ever or a total disaster." I stared into my beer. "He's straight, Marcus. Everyone knows it. Engaged once to some heiress before she called it off. If he finds out I couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus clapped my shoulder. "Then you keep it professional. Do the assignment, get your money, and move on. But Kai, you've been carrying this weight alone too long. Maybe this is the universe's weird way of saying it's time to stop hiding." I wanted to believe him. But when I got home and checked the system app again, a new message waited. Day 1 progress. 0. Schedule first interaction. I closed my eyes and saw Leonardo's face. That intense stare that made my pulse jump no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. Crazy target or not, I couldn't walk away. Not if I wanted to keep the life I'd built. The next morning, I walked into his office with a printed agenda and a knot in my stomach. Leonardo looked up from his desk, sleeves rolled up, revealing toned forearms that I definitely shouldn't have noticed. "You're persistent," he said, not unkindly. "Sit." I sat. The conversation started stiff: company goals, my old startup's tech, his vision for Vostech. But somewhere between the second coffee and the third awkward silence, he asked, "Why do you look like you're waiting for me to fire you?" I swallowed. "Because this assignment feels personal. And I don't do personal well." Leonardo leaned back, studying me. For the first time, his guard slipped just a fraction. "Neither do I, Kai. Neither do I." That tiny crack was enough to scare me more than any glitch. Because deep down I already knew I wasn't going to be able to treat this like just another task. The off-site team event was mandatory. A 2-day retreat at a lakeside lodge outside Seattle. When the email hit inboxes, I knew the system had orchestrated it. Leonardo was listed as keynote speaker, and my name appeared right under facilitator for breakout sessions. I stared at the calendar invite and felt the walls closing in. 48 hours of forced proximity with the one man who made my carefully constructed closet feel like a prison. I packed a duffel bag with more care than usual, choosing the navy sweater Jenna had given me last Christmas because it made my green eyes pop. Then I cursed myself for caring. This was business. Growth. Equity. Nothing more. The bus ride-up was quiet until we pulled into the gravel lot and Leonardo stepped out of his black SUV. He wore jeans and a simple gray Henley, looking nothing like the untouchable CEO from the tower. Rain misted the air, and he scanned the group until his gaze landed on me. A small nod, that was all, but it sent heat rushing up my neck. The first afternoon was filled with icebreakers and trust exercises. I kept my distance, leading my group through problem-solving games while Leonardo observed from the sidelines. During a break, he appeared beside me at the coffee urn. "You're good with people," he said quietly. "Why do you keep looking at me like I'm going to bite?" I almost dropped my cup. "I'm just trying to do the assignment right." He studied me for a long moment. "The system picked you for me too, you know. Same notification." I figured it was a joke until HR said it's non-negotiable. That revelation hit like a punch. Leonardo Voss had been assigned to me as well? The idea that the AI saw something between us, something mutual, made my chest tight. We stood there in the damp air, the lake lapping gently behind us, and for the first time the conversation didn't feel scripted. He asked about my startup days, about the late nights coding alone. I told him the truth. How building that app had been my escape when my parents found out I was gay and asked me to pray it away. Leonardo's expression softened. "Family can be brutal. Mine expects me to marry the right woman, close the right deals, keep the Voss name pristine. Sometimes I wonder if they'd even recognize the real me." He stopped abruptly, as if he'd said too much. That night the group gathered around a bonfire. Marcus had driven up to join as a guest consultant, and he kept shooting me encouraging looks. Leonardo sat across the flames, firelight dancing over his features. When everyone else drifted inside, he stayed. "Walk with me?" he asked. We followed the lakeside path, boots crunching on pine needles. He told me about growing up in Boston with a father who drilled legacy above all. I shared how I'd moved to Seattle to disappear into tech and never look back. The air between us felt charged, but neither of us crossed any line. Still, when our shoulders brushed accidentally, neither of us pulled away. Back at the lodge, I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling. The system pinged, "Day 3 progress, moderate. Deepen conversation tomorrow." I turned the phone face down. Deepen. The word scared me because I already felt it happening. Against my will, against every rule I'd set for myself. The next morning a storm rolled in, stranding us an extra day. Leonardo suggested we review quarterly projections in the conference room. What started as spreadsheets turned into stories. He admitted the engagement years ago had been arranged, that he'd called it off because he couldn't pretend anymore. I didn't push for details, but the way his voice dropped told me everything. When he asked about my dating life, I froze. There isn't one, I said. Not really. Not when it feels safer to stay invisible. Leonardo reached across the table and briefly squeezed my wrist. You don't have to be invisible here, Kai. That touch lingered long after he left the room. That evening Marcus cornered me in the hallway. I saw that. The way he looks at you isn't straight guy professional. Be careful, man. This could blow up everything. I wanted to argue, but Marcus was right. By the time the bus rolled back into Seattle, the misunderstanding had already begun. One of the junior analysts had overheard part of our lakeside talk and whispered to others that the new guy was getting cozy with the boss. By Monday, the office buzzed with rumors. Leonardo passed me in the hallway and gave me a curt nod. No smile, no warmth. The walls were back up. I spent the night staring at the system dashboard. Progress had spiked, but so had my fear. Because the more the AI pushed us together, the more I realized I didn't want the assignment to end. And that terrified me more than any glitch ever could. The business trip to New York came at the worst possible time. Vostek had a major investor meeting, and Leonardo insisted I attend as the former founder of the acquired tech. The system says we need more FaceTime, he told me in his office, voice clipped. So we're doing it. We flew first class. For 5 hours we sat side by side, knees occasionally brushing when the plane hit turbulence. Leonardo worked on his laptop, but I caught him glancing at me more than once. Over the Atlantic, he finally closed the screen. Tell me something real, Kai. Not the polished version you give HR. I hesitated, then told him about the night my dad found my browser history at 19 and drove me to a counselor who promised to fix me. How I'd smiled through it all and moved across the country the next week. Leonardo listened without interrupting, his jaw tight. When I finished, he said quietly, my father still thinks my single status is a phase. He sets up dinners with daughters of board members. I go because saying no costs too much. The honesty cracked something open between us. In the hotel that night, separate rooms, thank God, we grabbed late-night room service and talked until 3. He asked about my first crush. I asked about the woman he'd almost married. The conversation never turned physical, but the air felt heavier, warmer. When we said goodnight in the hallway, Leonardo lingered a second too long. Thanks for not making this weird, he said. The investor dinner the next evening was black tie. Leonardo looked devastating in his tux, and I caught several people staring at him the same way I tried not to. During cocktails, a board member's wife cornered him, pushing her daughter forward. I watched from across the room as Leonardo smiled politely, the mask firmly in place. Something possessive and painful twisted in my chest. Later, back at the hotel bar, he loosened his tie and ordered us both whiskeys. You looked ready to punch someone tonight, he said with a half smile. I shrugged. Just tired of watching people try to script your life. He studied me over the rim of his glass. You're the first person in years who sees past the Voss name. The words hung between us like a promise. When the elevator doors closed on our floor, neither of us moved right away. For one heartbeat, I thought he might lean in. Instead, he stepped back. Get some sleep, Kai. Tomorrow's going to be long. Flight delays stranded us an extra night. We wandered Manhattan in the rain, sharing an umbrella, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about the nonprofit he funded quietly for LGBTQ youth in Boston, something no one at Vostek knew. I told him about volunteering at the Seattle Pride Center on weekends. The more we shared, the more the system's bond felt real instead of forced. But the misunderstanding exploded on the plane home. A leaked photo from the investor dinner showed Leonardo and me standing close, laughing. Someone had captioned it CEO and new favorite, and it hit the company Slack. By the time we landed, Leonardo's assistant had forwarded him the chatter. He read it in the car and his face hardened. They think this is some kind of game, he said coldly. That I'm using you for optics or worse. I tried to explain it was just rumors, but he shut down. Maybe the system was wrong. Maybe we should keep this strictly professional from now on. The rest of the ride was silent. Back in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling, the system notification blinking. Progress. Significant. Maintain momentum. I wanted to throw the phone out the window, because the momentum was real, and it was breaking my heart. My parents flew in for a surprise visit the weekend after New York. Mom hugged me too tight at Seattle-Tacoma. Dad clapped my shoulder and asked if I was seeing anyone special yet. The usual dance. I introduced them to the sanitized version of my life. New role at Vostek, big projects, no mention of the man who occupied every spare thought. Sunday brunch turned into an interrogation. Dad slid a church bulletin across the table. They have a great young adults group in Spokane. Might be time to come home, son. Mom nodded along, eyes hopeful. I felt the old panic rise, the same one that had sent me running to Seattle at 20. That afternoon I escaped to the office, claiming urgent work. Leonardo was there too, tie gone, sleeves rolled, staring at quarterly reports like they held answers. He looked up when I entered. "Family in town?" he asked, reading the tension on my face. I nodded and told him the highlights, minus the part where they still prayed for my healing. Leonardo listened, then surprised me by sharing his own story. My dad flew in last month and spent 3 hours listing eligible women. When I said I wasn't interested, he reminded me the company stock drops every time the gossip columns mention my bachelor status. We ended up walking the empty halls, the city lights glittering below. Somewhere between the 10th floor and the rooftop terrace, the conversation shifted. He asked if I'd ever wanted to be out at work. I admitted the fear kept me small. He admitted the same. The rain started again, soft against the glass, and for a moment the world felt safe enough to imagine something more. But the company decision hit like a freight train on Monday. Vostek was cutting funding for the employee resource group that supported LGBTQ staff, Leonardo's quiet project. When the memo circulated, several colleagues looked at me like I should say something. I cornered Leonardo in his office. "You can't let this happen. Those programs matter." His jaw tightened. "It's business, Kai. My father's on the board. One wrong move and the whole acquisition unravels." The argument escalated. I accused him of hiding behind legacy. He accused me of pushing an agenda that could cost us both our futures. By the end he said quietly, "Maybe the system was right about one thing. You're making me question everything I built my life on." That night my sister Jenna called. I told her everything, well, almost everything. She listened and said, "Kai, you're falling for him. And if he's worth it, he'll choose you over the suit and the surname." I hung up and stared at the system dashboard. Progress had stalled. The AI didn't understand that real bonds sometimes required impossible choices. The next week was torture. Leonardo kept our interactions strictly professional, but I caught him watching me in meetings. My family extended their stay, pushing harder. Dad even suggested I bring a nice girl to Thanksgiving. I smiled through it all while inside I was unraveling. On Friday, I almost quit the assignment, almost walked into HR and said the system was broken. But then Leonardo texted at midnight, "Can't sleep. Thinking about what you said. Meet me at the office." I went. We sat on the floor of his office surrounded by takeout containers, talking until dawn. He apologized for the fight. I apologized for pushing. When the sun rose over the sound, he looked at me and said, "I don't know what this is, Kai, but I know I don't want to lose it." It wasn't a declaration. It was better. It was real. And for the first time I believed the crazy target the system had thrown at me might actually be the one person who could help me stop hiding. The glitch report landed on Leonardo's desk Tuesday morning. Someone in IT had traced the assignment anomaly and flagged it as unauthorized pairing. The memo was blunt. The system had never been meant to pair executives with acquired staff in this way. It was a bug, pure and simple. Leonardo read it in front of me, face draining of color. "You knew," he said, voice dangerously calm. You knew this was never real and you still let it happen. I tried to explain, the equity clause, the fear of losing everything, the way our conversations had stopped feeling like an assignment weeks ago. But he was already standing, hands clenched. I let you in, Kai. I told you things I've never told anyone. And it was all because some algorithm glitched. The betrayal in his eyes cut deeper than any family sermon. He ordered me out of his office and canceled every joint meeting. The system dashboard went dark. No new objectives, no progress tracker. It felt like the universe had slammed a door. I spent the next 3 days in a fog. Marcus dragged me out for drinks, but I barely spoke. Jenna flew down from Spokane and sat on my couch while I poured out the whole story. He thinks I used him, I said, voice cracking. And maybe I did at first. But somewhere along the line it became the most real thing in my life. She hugged me hard. Then fight for it. Show him you're not the assignment. You're the man who fell in love. Love. The word I hadn't let myself say out loud. That night I wrote the longest email of my life. I told Leonardo about the first time his laugh made my chest feel light. About how his quiet courage made me want to be braver. About the future I'd started imagining despite every warning light. I hit send at 3 a.m. and waited. No reply. On Friday I walked into HR and offered to resign the remaining equity deal. I can't complete the assignment, I told the director. Not like this. She looked stunned but accepted the paperwork. I was sacrificing the payout that would have changed my life, but keeping my self-respect felt more important. That evening I packed a bag, ready to drive back to Spokane and figure out what came next. My phone buzzed as I locked the apartment door. Leonardo. One line, rooftop. Now. I took the stairs 2 at a time. He was waiting under the overhang, rain soaking his shoulders, eyes red-rimmed. You resigned, he said. Why? Because I'd rather lose the money than lose you thinking this was ever fake. He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled me into a fierce hug. No words, just the steady beat of his heart against mine. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I read your email 100 times. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. The system might have started this, but you're the reason I want to finish it. We stood there in the rain, 2 men who had spent years hiding, finally holding on to something real. The misunderstanding wasn't gone, but the choice was clear. We were choosing each other. The Voss family gala was the last place I expected to be on a Saturday night. Leonardo had asked me to come, not as his growth partner, not as an employee, but as the man he wanted by his side. I'm done pretending, he'd said that morning over coffee in my kitchen. They can accept it or lose me. But I won't lose you. I wore the navy suit Jenna had helped me pick, nerves jangling as we walked into the glittering ballroom. His father spotted us immediately. The older man's smile froze when Leonardo introduced me. Not as Kai Thompson from the acquisition team, but as the man I'm with. The room didn't exactly go silent, but the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Throughout the evening, Leonardo never let go of my hand. We danced once, slow and careful under the crystal chandeliers, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was hiding. When his father pulled him aside, I waited by the bar, heart in my throat. 15 minutes later, Leonardo returned, jaw set but eyes bright. He said he needs time. I told him he has until the end of the quarter or I walk away from the company. I searched his face. You'd really do that? For us? Yes. The drive back to Seattle was quiet but peaceful. We stopped at the same lakeside lodge where the offsite had been, now empty in the off-season. Sitting on the dock with our feet dangling over the water, Leonardo turned to me. The system gave me a crazy target, he said with a soft laugh. And I almost walked away. Thank God I couldn't. I leaned my head against his shoulder. I kept thinking the same thing. Every time I told myself to quit, I couldn't. Because you weren't just an assignment. You were the first person who made me want to be fully seen. We talked until the stars faded. About telling my parents together. About building a life that didn't require hiding. about the friends and chosen family we'd gather around us. The system had glitched, but the bond it forced us to build had become the truest thing either of us had ever known. Months later, we stood on a California beach at sunrise, the same spot we'd escaped to for a long weekend. Leonardo slipped his hand into mine and said simply, "I love you, Kai. No algorithm required." I kissed him then, slow and sure, the ocean whispering approval. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been tears, arguments, sacrifices, and nights when identity felt like a battlefield. But every step had led here, to two men who had chosen each other over fear, over legacy, over every expectation the world tried to impose. True or false? A system's mistake can lead to the most authentic love of your life?